Hey guys, today I'm going to be doing a thermostat on this 2005 Buick Century. Let's get into it. Now I've actually got some extra parts here. While the car was in, I was also going to be doing heater hoses and a drive belt per the request of this customer. But here is my part. I bought 3 gallons of Dex Cool. That's a required coolant for this engine. I ended up only using about 1.5 gallons. So my first step here is going to be remove this portion of the air box. I'm going to pull off the vacuum line, and then I will be reaching for my 1/4-inch nut driver. A flathead screwdriver works just as well. Don't forget the one electrical connector on here as well. We'll take off this clamp really quick and we can swing this entire portion out of the way. You can see it has 2 clips on top, and it also has tabs on the bottom that hold it in place. But it comes out fairly quick and easy after you remove that 1/4-inch band clamp. I'm going to save that here for later use. It kind of fell off while I was working. I'm going to fully remove this little vacuum line from the back of the engine. Set it aside for later use. Now I'm going to start working on the electrical harness. Now this requires a little bit of finesse, but don't waste too much time trying to mark and identify where every connector goes. It will kind of all fall back into place. This does take a light touch though. You don't want to be breaking these connectors. It can get kind of expensive. This one here in the back, you can see it has a little gray connector clip on it that has to be popped out first before you can push the tab in and remove the connector. Last step here for the wiring harness is to remove this little clip holding everything in place, and I will kind of swing all that out of the way. Now there's 3 10mm nuts holding the throttle linkage in place. I'm going to go ahead and zip those out. And one of them sits on top of the stud that holds your throttle body in place, down here in the bottom right corner of it. Last one here. Now let's drop the coolant. We'll crawl underneath the driver's side corner, and it's hard to get on camera but up inside of here, it's going to drain out of that little hole there. If you go up on the inside of it, you reach in there, you can feel a little valve. I'm going to use some needle nose pliers to get in there and open it up and get it draining. And don't forget to close this back up before you start adding coolant. See, it comes out of there, kind of handy. Make sure you have your coolant collection ready. I will go ahead and pop the radiator cap to get it to drain out a little bit quicker there. All right, moving on. There, you can see across the front of this engine, there's a little coolant crossover tube that has two lines that connect to the bottom of your throttle body. So my next step is going to be to kind of loosen all of that up, because one of the tabs on this crossover tube is bolted onto the bottom of the throttle body, so it must be kind of swung out of the way. Now, I'm not going to go into detail too much with the heater hoses in this video, but without this little clamp removing tool, I don't think I would have been able to do it. It's very, very handy. So I'm going to take off this hose here on the passenger side, grab a hose hook, work my way around underneath the hose in the tube. If you work your way around it, you can kind of break the grip that it has on the tube and allow it to pop off a little nicer. There's also some clips down here that hold on to the spark plug wires. So I'm going to go ahead and free that up as well. Got more of the same here. The two little coolant hoses that go into the bottom of the throttle body come off a little bit nicer if you grab them with your hose hook. I'm going to take off the hose that goes to my heater core on the back side of that little crossover tube. Now back at it with the hose hook to loosen it up. Make sure you work your way all the way around these guys. You'll know it's free when you can grab a hold of the hose and twist it a little bit on the tube. We'll go ahead and pop that all the way off, and we should be free now to work this tube outward, just kind of away from our throttle body. We're not trying to remove it completely. Looks like my air filter popped out. Set that aside for now. Just trying to make it pop free of these two little hoses for the throttle body. This isn't something that you want to fight until you break something. So if it's not wanting to move at all, grab my hose hook and see if we can get these to loosen up a little bit more. Now we're going to remove our two 13mm bolts that are holding on to the throttle body. There's one on each corner. The bottom one is actually a stud. I will go ahead and swing that out of the way. Now in my case, I'm going to be reusing the gasket. I'd probably recommend that you replace the throttle body gasket, but we're going to start working on our two 13mm bolts that hold on to the thermostat housing here that sits right underneath the throttle body. These can be kind of a pain. I have a regular wrench here. I also used my ratchet wrench, but really it just takes a little bit of time with the regular wrench. The ratchet wrench was not super useful. Spin them off by hand here. Now it's not ideal to drop this one, especially the bottom one, but just know that there is some clearance down there to fish around if you do accidentally drop it. I know because I dropped it. We will go ahead and fish off this last one here using the ratchet wrench, like I said. See if we can get a better shot at that. I'll just pop this off. Should have the coolant drain by now, and there's your thermostat right there. Go ahead and grab a pair of pliers so we can grab a hold of it. Pop it on out of there. You want to make sure the whole seal comes with it, and that there's no gunk left on your thermostat housing or on the engine side. If there is, you definitely need to spend some time cleaning it up. This one came off fairly clean. I didn't show it in this video, but I noticed later on that this thermostat was completely stuck open, and that's why it wasn't wanting to heat up. Here's my new one. I'm going to go ahead, the larger side in first, just like it came out. These don't need to be clocked any particular way. And that's about it. I'll go ahead and put this back on. We'll button it up. Get this first one in kind of hand tied. Whenever you're assembling anything, you want to make sure that you start all of your bolts hand tight first before you try and tighten anything down, or else it's not going to want to go together. I'll get the camera back in place here and I will start working on this bottom bolt. Again, starting at finger tight, and I will finish them both up with a ratchet or a regular wrench. You'll notice throughout this video that I never finish tightening anything with power tools. It's good to get a feel for this kind of thing. You really don't want to be putting stuff back together with power tools. They're only for disassembly. Especially on a sealing surface. Alright, got the bottom one in. Go ahead and tighten up this top one. And like I said, the ratchet wrench wasn't really working great for me, so I switched to the regular wrench. Now let's go back together with our throttle body. See the two hoses there on the bottom. You want to make sure your linkage goes back the same way. It'll need a little bit of finagling to get it perfect. We're going to go ahead and line it up close and start our two bolts. Being careful not to damage the gasket if you saved it. I'm going to run these in very lightly first, saving some time with the ratchet and socket. We'll finish those up by hand. Now we're going to bolt on our throttle linkage, line it up on the studs. Again, we will run everything in by hand. Down here on the bottom, before I put this nut on, I'm going to make sure my coolant crossover tube is in place. Start that one by hand. We'll get our other hoses in place. Sometimes a hose hook comes in handy for installation as well. Making sure as we go, we're putting on every clamp. Don't really want to leave them behind. That's one of those things that can be easy to forget. So I never leave a hose attached and unclamped. work it into place. Go ahead and install our little bolt down here, our little hold down bolt. Tighten it up by hand. Get our spark plug wires clipped back in place. All right, now we're ready to go ahead and start our little 10mm nut that screws onto the stud. It's the same stud that holds on the throttle body. Tighten that up. Get the rest of our 10mm screws and nuts in place. We will tighten everything up by hand. Can't forget this little guy down here. That's pretty much it. We're going to put our air filter back in and reinstall the rest of our air cleaner routing, as well as all of the electrical connectors, and we'll be good to add coolant, get it warmed up, and see if we will reach temperature now. Go ahead and tighten this back up with my 1/4 inch nut driver. Like I said, I'll just kind of lay this in place and see where everything falls. That's the easiest guide to getting all of this stuff back into place. A good rule of thumb for any of this stuff is if you have to force it, you're doing something wrong. So we'll take our time one at a time getting all of these connectors back in place. And now one of the funner parts is getting this vacuum line back in place. It's kind of a pain in the butt, and it has to be routed a specific way through the wiring harness. So try a couple different ways. If it doesn't feel like it's wanting to line up properly, maybe it needs to be fished through the wiring harness in a different way. It took me a couple of tries to get it just right. And as you can see, you have to get a little bit acrobatic to see where it goes to the back of the engine. What worked for me was removing the wiring from the clip, getting it into place, and reinstalling the wiring. Now you do want to be careful when you're doing stuff like this, as there's a lot of fragile things there. Mainly all your little vacuum controlled components that you don't want to snap. All right, let's add some coolant to this thing. Now my first step is going to be to open both of the bleeders. You'll see there's one on the coolant crossover tube that we were working on, and as well as one on the driver's side. I'll go ahead and pop both of those open before I add any coolant. You don't need to remove the screws all the way. I didn't realize until I already had, but they are just bleeder screws that only need to be cracked. Now we will add some of our Dex Cool orange coolant to this guy. And we're going to add coolant until it comes out of the passenger side bleeder first. For me, this car took about 1.5 gallons of coolant. Once it starts coming out of that bleeder, I'll tighten it up. I'm gonna go ahead and run it for a little while until it wants to come out of the driver's side bleeder. Once it starts coming out, I will tighten that guy up. We will top off our radiator as well as our coolant overflow reservoir and start working this thing up to operating temperature. Hopefully it reaches it this time, because it hasn't been reaching operating temperature. As I'm doing this, I'll be looking for any kind of leaks, any kind of drips. This car was fine. Once it starts to want to come out of the radiator, I will button it up, put the radiator cap back in place, and continue warming up the car to operating temperature. It's kind of difficult to see just how much this car needs, but it's not as much as you would think. The line's pretty far down there, and it's difficult to see without any kind of flashlight. When you're working this up, you want to run this until the fans come on. Go through an entire cycle, and then I will go back and check my overflow reservoir, make sure it's at the full hot line, and we're good to go. This repair is just about done. You can see inside of here that I'm now, for the first time in a while, reaching operating temperature. So, all good. Like and subscribe if this was helpful.